for the New York Police Department. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. David, the question of why is what lingers now. The death toll can still rise. The number of injured could still rise. We are still in the hours, even though it's moving towards closer to 12 hours now since this horrific incident. But why is lingering around all of this? We don't know why. How does law enforcement get closer to figuring out the why?
Well, it's the usual thing they're going to go into is take his computer, take his BlackBerry, cell phone, smartphone, whatever he's had. He's going to look at anything he's done on social media, any emails he's wrote. They're going to speak to people who know him well. Apparently his neighbors think he's just a quiet, regular guy, but he's going to have some contact with other people who know him to a greater extent. Maybe he has some political contacts. Maybe the woman he's involved with does. At this point, they're not saying anything, but there clearly is a motive, and it probably isn't just that he doesn't like country music.
That's absolutely right. I mean, you have to assume, Jonathan, this was planned well in advance. Absolutely. You have to assume that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to assume that he would request a hotel room that faces this concert.
Kate, this is not a crime of opportunity. This was premeditated. He thought about this, the room placement, the weapon systems that he's going to use, the target, the concert. So what, to your point, there's an investigative process going on right now. What they're going to start looking for is pre-attack indicators. What was he doing? So social media is a great source. Talking to neighbors. There has to be some sort of catalyst that set this individual off to create such or act out such a horrific act.
There has to be something. His brother seems to have absolutely no clue, and that's always the thing, Tom. That seems to be there are two themes that seem to be reoccurrent. The poor victims who get caught in this, everyone thinks it's fireworks at first because they cannot believe that they are living through something like this. And in the aftermath, the family never seems to know.
No. I mean, I've been to Mandalay Bay. I've been to Vegas a number of times. I've stayed at Mandalay Bay a few times, actually. And and I'm actually somewhat of a country music fan. So had I been in Vegas, I could have very well been at that concert. And my condolences to the family and friends that were caught in this horrific attack. You know, as we talked about before, there's usually there's got to be something. Otherwise, people are not going to be able to make sense of this, right? If this is just something that people just don't go and do on a whim, right? So
especially with an excess of 10 weapons.
Right, exactly. I mean, I don't know if they thought that he was an ice hockey player coming in there with, you know, big bags carrying rifles. I mean, I don't know what they thought that he was carrying there.
A lot of people, I mean, that's the thing about Vegas. You go in with a lot of tennis rackets. You can go in with lots of golf bag, you know? I mean, that's
a lot of weight.
It's a lot of weight.
10 rifles are going to be a considerable amount of weight.
Be pretty heavy.
It's going to get someone's attention. There's going to be some. Well, why do you have bags that are, you know, feel like they have metal in them?
And again, it goes to the point that, you know, this is premeditated. It's reported that he was staying at the hotel since the 28th.
Yeah, that's Thursday. Yeah.
So making multiple runs to a car. I mean, rifles are one thing. Think about the ammunition. The rate of fire of this attack, the amount of ammunition that he had to have stockpiled in that room. It'll be interesting to see after the fact what happens with the investigation from Mandalay Bay. Did housekeeping go into the room? You know, what are these pre-attack behavior?
I've got a couple weapons questions I want to get to you in 1 second, David. But Cedric, let me bring you in on this. I mean, if you're a police chief in any major American city right now, you wake up to seeing this scene overnight, and what are you thinking? What do you need to do differently now?
Well, first of all, let me say my condolences to those who lost their lives last night, and to those 406 people that are reportedly injured. Still a lot of triaging being done, and it's very painful for all of us. But I can tell you, myself and many of my colleagues across this country who have been chiefs, it is shocking. It is disturbing. It certainly brings about a lot of questions as to why this would occur. And mostly all we're being right now at this point, quite frankly, is very speculative in terms of what occurred, what motivated this, what was the motive behind it. Was it politically influenced, or was it someone who was having some mental health issues? Because regardless of what forced him to do this, there's clearly something very wrong was going on his side of his head. But I think at this point of this investigation, as the investigators pull this information together and it begin to crystallize, it will make more sense to all of us as to what occurred last night. And one of the questions my colleagues were there talking about just a moment ago, how did he get this amount of weaponry into his room? He could have done it a little bit at a time. He could have done it in concert with other persons. We don't know. But what we do know is that there's an ongoing investigation, and I think within some reasonable amount of time, we'll have a much clearer understanding as to what motivated this and what all led up to this. But this is just absolutely horrific and very painful for all of us as Americans today.
And Jonathan, you spend a lot of time advising folks on security situations.
Absolutely.
Now, is this something that, I mean, is this something you have to offer advice for?
Kate, I've spent the last year talking to different trade organizations, the Convention Industry Council, the different groups, Meeting Planner International. This was the example that I constantly gave around, tragic, dynamic situations that can occur at events. And it comes down to, planning for every type of contingency. What I think is really interesting, though, with this attack is that the basic elements of run, hide, fight were followed. You saw that right away. Once people recognized that there was a threat, they dispersed. What's different, though, is that the attacker was elevated.
Right.
So we're not talking about a horizontal plane anymore. We're talking about an elevated shooter. So as people were running and doing the right thing, trying to hide, they actually were exposing themselves more. It's a real game changer, I think, to have this type of attack.
Typically, I've been involved in active shooter response for 20 years, 10 years in private industry. In New York, we do avoid barricade confront. It's similar, it's a little different, but it's similar. The issue here is, number one, you're trying to avoid, but you're in a crowd. Your ability to evacuate the scene is very, very limited.
And an open air festival where there are very few places to hide.
No cover, and then finally, what's the third? Either confront or fight. You got a guy's 32nd floor. There is no fight. So this is the worst of all possible circumstances, and the venue could have done nothing because they're going to do the usual stuff. They're going to screen people. They're going to check see if they're armed or not. But you can't take now. You have the elevated issue that is outside their control.
David, real quick, important things that we need that you want to know about the weapons right now. Why does it matter?
How does he get a fully automatic weapon? Clearly that's a rate of fire of just off my, it's hard to say, but
right.
You're talking about probably a submachine gun, which is a handgun round firing at between 700 and 800 rounds a minute. That's illegal to purchase unless you have a tax stamp. How does he get that weapon? And apparently he had multiple, so I'm sure the ATF is going to be tracking that down first and foremost. First
and foremost, no kidding. Gentlemen, we've got a lot to come this hour, and unfortunately we're all sitting here together talking about something like this today. If you could stick with me, I really appreciate it. We're going to get back to all of you in just one second. Coming up, we're going to hear, though, from more eyewitnesses who are on the ground, who were there amongst the 22,000 festival goers enjoying a beautiful night in Vegas for a concert when these shots came raining down on them and turned the concert into the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. Also ahead for us, Las Vegas police. They're set to be giving another news update. They have done a very good job of keeping everyone updated throughout the night into the morning. We're looking forward to getting another update from them very soon. We'll bring that to you. Stay with us.